I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, August 7th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see a gale over the central South Pacific with seas in the 26-foot range, but most of those seas are aimed southeast at the Antarctic ice shelf, not up towards California or Hawaii, likely resulting in no swell production. Let's get into the details. As usual, we'll start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a push into the jet to the north, and we kind of see it right there, just barely. What that helps do is create a clockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds, if they're strong enough over a large enough fetch area, make traction with the ocean surface, can create seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, groom out and turn into swell. Swell and hit your beach turns into surf. So we have barely a trough, but mainly we have the opposite of trough, a ridge pushing south down into Antarctica. That helps create high pressure right there, and that does absolutely nothing for creating meaningful surf for our forecast area. All right, as we put this into motion on Monday, August 8th, the jet turns more into a zonal pattern. That is, it runs from west to east. And it's the southern branch we're looking at right here. This is the northern branch. Look at the northern branch. It's splitting, colliding with the southern branch, and then the two of them push even deep into Antarctica. None of that looks particularly good for supporting gale development. And as we go into Wednesday, here comes another ridge pushing south, not looking particularly positive again. Thursday, more of the same. As we get into Friday, a little bit of a trough is forecast developing. That's Friday, August 12th. South New Zealand's right there. So it'll be southeast of New Zealand. Now, the other key point is the ice line. The Antarctic ice line's right about 62 south, and it even pushes up to 60 south over the central South Pacific. So there is not much ice-free water in the deep South Pacific to support storm development. Earlier in the year, when you're in May and even late April, the ice line's way down here. It's summertime in the southern hemisphere, so it's down at like 68 or maybe even further south than that. You get a lot more open ocean for winds to get traction on. But now we're in the peak of winter in the deep southern hemisphere, just after the peak of summer in the northern hemisphere. And of course, that does nothing to help our cause. As we get into Saturday, then here comes this trough trying to build a little bit. Saturday, August 13th, you see winds at 120 knots pushing to the north right here. Maybe a little bit of a circulation can get going. And then we're into Sunday. The trough continues, but it's kind of getting pinched off. Doesn't look particularly favorable. And there we are 180 hours out, and it's almost gone. So maybe one little trough to look forward to. So let's go take a look down at the surface. Surface level pressure, surface level winds. We know there's a gale here in the deep central South Pacific, but you can see the arrows right here. The winds pushing to the southeast. Yeah, the wind's getting traction on the ocean surface, but it's not making swell for us, only for penguins. As we move into Monday, then you see sort of the result of the zonal jet stream flow setting up. There's winds 35 knots, 40 knots in pockets, pushing off mainly to the east. Another little bit here with 50 to 55 knot winds. This is Monday night, but right on the ice line, probably not getting a lot of traction and quickly moving out of even the Southern California swell window. Southern California is at 117 west, so right here, all this fetch pretty much aimed off to the east. I mean, maybe some background swell will result from this, but we're not particularly impressed with anything we're seeing. So you get into Wednesday, more of the same, sort of that zonal flow going on. If anything, fetch here, 35, 40 knots, pushing southeast again. We just keep looking out. Now, here's a decent gale looking to form on Friday, the 12th of August. But again, pretty much on the hairy edge of the Southern California swell window and out of there probably before the winds even get any traction. Now we get into Saturday. Things looking a little bit better here. a stronger gale, winds all aim south, but something developing south of New Zealand here with 45-knot winds. We know there's a trough in that area, and it continues to lift north while weakening into Sunday, and pretty much already gone. Notice, here comes the fetch again, aimed due south at Antarctica on Sunday the 14th of August, and there we are 180 hours out, and we go back to nothing. Let's go take a look at the effect of these winds on the ocean surface. But before we do that, a quick look back in time. Wednesday, the 3rd of August. Yes, a tiny is the operative word here. Little gale southeast of New Zealand. Also, look at the ice line here. Well, there's 60 south, down at 63, maybe 62, up to 60, almost 59 south, just cutting off huge chunks of the South Pacific Ocean. Anyway, our gale by Wednesday evening, that'd be the 3rd of August, had 34-foot seas, and then pretty much started dissipating. 29-foot seas Thursday morning. Thursday night, 29 to 30-foot seas. That was the 4th of August. And then started fading from there. Still, the expectation is small swell, very small swell for Hawaii, like 1 foot at 16 seconds or something. But maybe a little bit more for California, in the 2-foot range at 16 seconds, something like that, maybe 17 seconds. So something to look forward to. Look at the quick cast. You can get all the details on that. As we move into Sunday, the 7th of August, here we are now, and not a whole lot going on. Let's go look at the forecast. So that was all hindcast data. That is the model's best estimate based on known winds, based on satellite data from a variety of sources, not only wind satellite data, but sea height satellite data, trying to make its best guess of what the actual seas were on the ocean surface. Now this is all forecast, just based purely on the GFS model and its projections on wind speeds on the ocean surface. So little gale, we see that. Maybe most energy all aimed off to the east. Something for Chile and Peru, maybe up into Central America. Probably not a whole lot for California, but maybe some background at best. Anyway, we get into Tuesday. Yes, activity happening, all racing off to the east. Nothing aimed off to the northeast. That's what we need for California and for Hawaii. Another little gale on Thursday, 29-foot seas, again aimed off to the east. Tiny little gale on Friday with 30-foot seas on the edge of the Southern California swell window and quickly out of there before you know it. Now we get into Saturday, another little tiny gale forecast developed south of New Zealand. This one probably offers the best hope with, 32-foot seas, and that's it. This gale, yeah, you go, that looks impressive. Well, it's all falling south, and it's out of the Southern California swell window. And even this gale here, pretty much gone by Sunday, and that's the end of it. So maybe hope for one little tiny little swell a week or more from this coming Saturday. So almost 2 weeks out, if you believe the models. So let's look for Windswell. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of that either, but maybe that's kind of a good thing. So California here, Hawaii out here, the Gulf of Alaska high pressure system, 1030 millibars, a bit displaced away from the coast with low pressure just off of Cape Mendocino. Light winds. For the first time all summer, it seems like, a light wind regime has set up along California, and believe it or not, it's done dramatic things to help improve surface water temperatures. The upwelling machine is shut down with all those northwest winds out of the picture, and things are warming up finally, for real. A little bit of fetch, 15 knots, aimed at the Hawaiian Islands, not really doing much. You really need something more than just a broken up 15-knot fetch to get any sort of meaningful wind swell. So we get into Monday, pretty much the same deal, low holding off the coast, a little bit of trades coming into the islands. Tuesday, August 9th, same deal, high pressure displaced off to the west. So we get into Wednesday, August 10th, no real change, maybe some sort of weak tropical system trying to push south of Hawaii, but not really of any particular interest. Thursday, light winds continue. There is this tropical system. We're going to get into that in just a second, but really it is never expected to even reach hurricane status. maybe some background swell for Southern California, like 11-second period sort of thing. And then finally on Friday, a little bit of wind starts building along the California coast. Tropical low develops a little bit after passing Hawaii. So we get into Saturday. Now trades come mainly limited to Northern California. They're a bit pulled away from the coast here. So almost a week of warming, another week of warming expected for the California coast, with trades or northwest winds, whatever you want to call it, really pretty minimal. And then Sunday, more of the same. Light winds, probably not enough to, maybe some little tiny wind swell on Sunday. And yes, there you go. Finally, what looks like the typical summertime pressure gradient along North California. That would create wind swell for Central California and San Francisco up into Bodega Bay in that area, with a light wind regime for the Hawaiian Islands. And as promised, Tropical Storm Howard here south of Cabo San Lucas. So these are what? 2 degrees, 60 nautical, if you're going north and south, it's 60 nautical miles for every 1 degree. So we're going 1, 2, 3. So that's 6 degrees at 60, 360 nautical miles south of Cabo San Lucas. Winds 35 knots. I mean, that's really nothing. Wind's supposed to get to 50 knots, somewhere in here. That would be in the Southern California swell window. Again, the Southern California right about 117 west. So all this right here would be in the swell window for like a 175, 180 degree swell. But given only 50 knot winds over a small area, the track is decent enough. If it's a west-north west track, forget about it. But when it's more this kind of northwest track, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet at 11 seconds, something like that. I guess you take what you can get, though, and be happy for it, especially this time of year. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden Julian Oscillation and the El Nino Southern Oscillation? We start by looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO, the Madden Julian Oscillation. There's 2 phases, active and inactive. The active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other side. They rotate west to east above the equator around the planet. One on one side of the planet, one on the other. The active phase is the one we're interested in. It supports or helps support storm development by when it moves over the West Pacific, it feeds energy to the jet stream, and then it can also dampen trade winds there, which in turn can create a thing called a Kelvin wave, taking warm water in the West Pacific and pushing it east under the equator. Successive active phases of the MJO, if they're strong enough, can create successive Kelvin waves, and that in turn leads to an eruption of warm water off of Ecuador. That in turn is the hallmark of El Nino, and everyone knows that El Nino is good for storm and surf production. All right, so we're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. The inactive phase, we're not going to really concern ourselves with, other than to say that if the active phase is a low pressure system, the inactive phase is high pressure. It dampens storm production, takes energy away from the jet stream splits, and it just kind of turns into a mess, and does not support Kelvin wave development. If anything, it does the opposite. It creates upwelling Kelvin waves, cold water erupting in Ecuador. All right, so we start by looking for signs of the active phase. Is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here, the equator right there. 180, that's the international date line. That is New Guinea right there. All right. The Kelvin wave generation area, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Just draw a box in your mind's eye right here. The West Pacific, right on the equator. When the active phase moves over here, see these arrows? These are the trade winds. The longer the arrow, the stronger the trades. Trade's pretty strong out of the east and the East Pacific, pretty strong over the Central Pacific, and moderately strong over the Kelvin wave generation area. If the active phase of the MJO were here, these arrows would be a lot shorter. But it's not. These are the average wind speeds. That's not really what we need to know. It's anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. Because sometimes of the year, the trades just nuke. Other times, not so much. It's the relative difference that creates Kelvin waves. So in the Far East Pacific, trade's just barely a little bit stronger out of the east. Central Pacific, weak to modestly out of the east. Kelvin wave generation area, modestly out of the east. Again, no sign of the active phase of the MJO. Let's move on. Next up, zonal wind anomalies. The bottom half of the chart we just looked at, that differences from normal for this time of year, that's what this chart is. But it's not just for one little area. It has fancy colors to show you wind direction. The blues and purples are easterly anomalies. So that would be the inactive phase of the MJO. Reds and yellows, westerly anomalies. Consider that the active phase of the MJO. But let's get ourselves oriented. All right, so this is the whole planet, right? The date line runs right up the middle at 180. So 0, that's like over right near England. The far west Pacific starts at 135 east, so right there. And then the Kelvin wave generation area ends at 170 west. And then Ecuador is over about 80 west, something like that. So the area we're really interested in, just the Kelvin wave generation area, is right in here. All right. Easterly anomalies. That's more than the inactive phase of the MJO. That looks like La Nina. Nary a westerly anomaly to be found, nary a Kelvin wave potential to be found. Looking down here, well, things actually look a little bit better. This is just for the next week. When we don't have the purples, at least, just we'll say modest easterly anomalies, maybe a weakening. You almost see some westerly anomalies here trying to push into the West Pacific, then stalling out and not making it. Let's keep digging. All right, let's go look out 15 degrees. This is to the current situation, out 5 days, 10 days, 15 days. Let's get ourselves oriented. This is South America, so Chile, Peru, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, Australia, the Philippines. Dateline right there. Equator right there. Same thing 4 times over. Kelvin wave generation area right here. So this suggests, and this is the statistic model, it suggests the active phase of the MJO. Oh, this is outgoing long wave radiation. Okay, so what's that mean? This is not east and west component of the wind. This is there more or less cloud cover than normal? If the active phase of the MJO is low pressure, well, low pressure generates clouds. If you have clouds, you have less sunlight reflecting off the ocean surface. This is outgoing long wave radiation. Sunlight bouncing off the ocean surface. The blues are negative anomalies, so it means less sunlight than normal bouncing off the ocean surface. Must be pretty cloudy there. That one can loosely take to mean the active phase of the MJO. Okay, that's good news. Go out 5 days. Hey, it's still there. 10 days, still there. 15 days, still there. This per the statistic model. Now, the dynamic model has a little bit different take on things. It says, yeah, active phase is here. It's supposed to die out 5 days from now. 10 days from now. Inactive phase of the MJO sets up and continues 2 weeks from now. So you can see the last panel right here of the statistic model, much different than the last panel of the dynamic model. So the two models a little bit confused as to what the 2 week outlook would be. And you wonder why we don't take the models even 4 or 5 days out too seriously. And when you get into 2 weeks, well, you see why. So let's drill in just a little bit deeper. Those same two models, statistic model here, dynamic model here, these are what is known as phase diagram charts. They just show you which phase of the MJO, fancy, just say where on the planet is the active phase of the MJO located and how strong is it. So we're not going to look at anything, just these are the phases, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The MJO active phase moves from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, and back to the Indian Ocean, round and round and round. Takes about, 3 to 4 weeks to make its way across the Pacific, something like that. All right, so the heavy dot is where the active phase is right now, over the Maritime Continent. So think Bali. And 2 weeks from now, moving into the West Pacific. That's good news. But the further the dots are away from this circle here, the stronger the MJO. So this is a weak, active MJO per the statistic model, getting even weaker and making it to the West Pacific. Now the dynamic model, not even that favorable, suggesting just basically the active phase just noodling around, maybe some racing off to the east and in the Indian Ocean. It needs to be moving slower to get traction over the West Pacific, and it certainly has to be much stronger. The dots need to be up in here somewhere. If we saw that, I'd be thinking maybe El Nino's coming. But when you see this, especially in the Pacific, well, La Nina tends to really dampen the active phase of the MJO, take the wind out of it, and that's kind of what we're seeing. Let's keep going. Upper level model, up at the jet stream level, 200 millibar, even actually above the jet stream. Areas favorable for precipitation. The greens, favorable for precip. That would be the active phase of the MJO. The yellows and reds, dry air. That would be the inactive phase of the MJO. This goes out 40 days. Let's get ourselves, so 8 different panels, 5 days a panel. South America there, Central America, New Guinea, the Philippines. 0 is the equator. Dateline roughly there. Kelvin wave generation area right in there. So you can just go boom, boom, boom right down the chart and see what's happening in the Kelvin wave generation area. Areas favorable for precipitation are green. So, gosh, it kind of looks like the active phase of the MJO, week 1, moving into the Kelvin wave generation area in 5 days, sort of quickly passing through it and out of there by August 27th. And then moving into Central America and gone, and the inactive phase comes right behind that. So late August, inactive phase, taking over the Pacific and in control by mid-September, right at the start of fall. Darn. So let's look out a little bit farther. This is the CFS model going out 1 month. Now this tells a little bit of a better picture. Again, this is the east-west component of the wind. The blues are easterly anomalies, the inactive phase. The reds and yellows, westerly anomalies, the active phase. But we need to sort of get ourselves oriented. Dateline runs right up the middle of the chart. Again, there's the whole plan on one chart. So Kelvin wave generation area starting about 135 east. So right in this box here, and you go, well, all I see is blues, so what's so favorable about that? Well, so the dark line here is a sense of the active phase of the MJO, and you see, you can kind of connect these. It depends how they do the scaling on these models, but you can kind of sense that the active phase is going to move across the Kelvin wave generation area starting, well, maybe about now. Look at that. Some westerly anomalies forecast out a week from now in the Kelvin wave generation area, then quickly getting tamped down. And then the active phase finally wakes up with westerly anomalies once it gets in the East Pacific. This is all the typical La Nina thing. It destructively interfering with the active phase of the MJO. The MJO tries to make its way across into the West Pacific. The La Nina signal, this dotted purple thing right here, just like takes the wind out of it. As soon as the active phase gets out of the area that the La Nina or the high pressure bias is in control of, it wakes up and produces westerly anomalies. Okay? And then as we get into August 20th, here comes the inactive phase of the MJO, the dotted contour, easterly anomalies set up again, and we're back into not a favorable pattern. So I guess if there was any favorable pattern, it would seem to be in the next week to 2 weeks, maybe a little support for this westerly anomaly here might produce or impart a little bit of energy to the jet stream, but really the footprint's so small, we're not expecting a whole lot out of it. And then finally, the 3-month CFS model. If I don't get satisfaction looking out a week or 2 weeks, no matter how silly it is, well, then I'll go look out 3 months. And I think I see something that interests me. All right, so let's go take a look. So this is, again, the whole plan on the chart, on one chart. The east-west component of the wind, it's really 850 millibars, so that's up about 4,700 feet. The surface is like 925, something like that. Anyway, so this is past performance down here, and let's get ourselves oriented. Dateline runs right up the middle. Kelvin wave generation area starts about 135 east, so right about there. So the box we're interested in is roughly right in here. And this is the forecast. This is past performance here. Now notice, big old blob of blues. That's easterly anomalies. That's inactive phase of the MJO. Not looking good. Getting pretty strong, too, as we get into the latter part of August and early September. But look at this. Notice the westerly anomalies. This model's been continually hinting at some flavor of this, with westerly anomalies, or at least neutral anomalies, not only making it to the date line, but almost to California as we get into October. If there is ever a big red X for storm production, if you want to believe a model 3 months out, I would say somewhere right in here from early October into November. And this model's been hinting at this in a variety of different ways, which we will get to in a minute. So let's do our detailed analysis. Overlay the MJO, the solid contours here, active phase of the MJO. So a little bit, here's that little active phase of the MJO. Each one of these tick marks are a week. So maybe a little active phase for the next week and a half, something like that. Then this last significant push of the inactive phase of the MJO. And I say last in quotations. We'll get into that in a minute. And then a big push of the active phase of the MJO starting late August, early September, and remnants of it hanging on in the Kelvin wave generation area the whole way through September and October, almost to the beginning of November. That's pretty solid indeed. Now we're going to overlay yet one more component, the low pass filter. This is high pressure, low pressure bias. The dotted contour, the high pressure bias, the La Nina bias, if you will say that. And there's this little thing going on that we noticed. So we're looking at the western edge of the high pressure bias. It's actually forecast to sort of grow or retrograde back to the west a little bit here in the early part of September. But if you start looking, you get the sense that it's going to start bending back to the east over time. And the low pressure bias, this is the El Nino bias, currently set up over the maritime continent. This is the classic La Nina kind of pattern. But you notice second contour line building, also a second contour line on the high pressure bias. And you also see the eastern edge of this at least straight, but maybe starting to curve off to the east some. The suspicion is this guy, we think as we get deeper into winter, is going to start edging to the east more as this La Nina signal starts collapsing and pushing off to the east as well. The more this low pressure bias can get in the Kelvin wave generation area, if you look at the eastern edge of it right now, the forecast has it at about 140, 150. So that's maybe 30, 40% into the Kelvin wave generation area. If you can get another 15 or 20% over, another 10 degrees or something like that, that would certainly put us in business for the winter. And we think that's exactly what's going to happen as we get into January, February sort of time frame. All right, let's go look longer term then. The El Nino, La Nina signals. We're going to go start looking down in the ocean. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys that are strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. These X's here, actual anchor lines on the buoys. The individual X's are sensors on those anchor lines going down 300 meters, 900 feet. The anchor line actually goes the whole way to the ocean, the bottom of the ocean. I don't know how deep it is out there, 8,000 feet or something. But they stuck sensors on the top 1,000 feet so that they could see the migration or monitor the migration of Kelvin waves as they progress across the subsurface Pacific. And this buoy array was established back in the early to mid 80s, I think it was, after the big El Nino of 82, 83. I mean, that caught everybody off guard. It, had significant weather impacts, crop damage, storms, rain, snow, all that kind of stuff. And everyone realized it was part of El Nino, but they didn't have a good early warning system. So this was the first attempt to do that, and it's still active to this day. They literally take ships out there to go check the sensors, update the sensors, and there's buoys bobbing out here. They have to go update the solar panels on them, and they radio their data or transmit it microwave up to satellites. Anyway, the data is processed in the central facility. They run it through a model to fill in the gaps, because you see there's some pretty big holes between each of these lines of sensors, and you get a profile of what's going on subsurface, a way to watch incoming Kelvin waves. All right, so 29-degree isotherm right here. It's actually made some progress off to the east. If you have a Kelvin wave, these lines here start pushing off to the east as warm water, the reds here, starts moving off to the east. So literally every day I go take a look and just, where are the lines at? Have they moved east or west? I mean, the exact opposite is true too. If you don't have a Kelvin wave, you have a upwelling phase, the lines will retrograde to the west. Right now, 29-degree isotherm actually has moved a little bit off to the east by a degree since last week. Same thing here on the 28-degree isotherm. It was about 178 east last week, 180 this week. The 24-degree isotherm, I think, was back at 55 or 160 last week, moving off to 140. And then the 24-degree isotherm, pretty much unchanged, pretty shallow here in the east. But it's not, again, it's not the actual temperatures. It is the differences from normal, the anomalies for this time of year, right? Okay, so now you can clearly see if there were a Kelvin wave, well, there's warm water there, cold water there. A Kelvin wave would be this ball of warm water starting to progress off to the east and then eventually erupting into Ecuador. So we have 2-degree centigrade anomalies above normal, and they have made, at least according to this, pretty decent progress. So they were at 170 or maybe 169 last week. Now they have made it to about 155, 157, really? And then now this cold batch of anomalies here is the ocean's typical reaction to an upwelling Kelvin wave. Here's the remnants of a Kelvin wave that has just finished erupting in the past week or so, getting ready to push into Ecuador with 1-degree anomalies, and it's gurgling up to the surface and discharging. Cold water comes in behind. This is not unexpected. If we get a decent active phase of the MJO and westerly anomalies pushing this direction like that, then that will literally take this warm water and start setting it in motion to the east. Again, under the ocean surface, not on the surface. And then it hits Ecuador, erupts to the surface, the trade winds catch that water and then start blowing it along the surface from east to west. So it's sort of a cycle. Downwelling Kelvin wave, warm water, upwells to the east, gurgles to the surface, the trades catch it, goes off, and round she goes. All right, now that's one model's view of the world. There is another model, not nearly as optimistic, unfortunately. But what it does show is a very large volume of warm water here in the far west Pacific, only making it to 170 west, something like that, with a rather big bolus of cool water here from almost the date line to a point south of California, and then the last little remnants of the last Kelvin wave erupting off of Ecuador. Sea level anomalies. So this is a satellite version of doing what the TAO buoy arrays do. Rather than having to deal with the maintenance of buoys out in the middle of the ocean and anchor lines and solar panels and mechanical stuff and sensors inside the buoy, trying to, as the buoy sloshes around, trying to sort out what's going on and temperature-wise. This is just beam a satellite down on the ocean surface and tell me, is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Get rid of all the wind waves, get rid of the swell, get rid of the tides, and is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? So let's get ourselves oriented here. Chile, Peru, Central America there, Baja, Hawaii right there, the date line right there, the equator there, that's New Guinea there, Kelvin wave generation area right around in here. But it's really just this, we're going to look at this entire swath, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Warm water in the west, no surprise. Here's that cold upwelling thingy with minus 15 centimeter anomalies. That's, I don't know how big, oh, okay, I probably have it here. 15 centimeters is, oops, sorry, you can't see it, that much. The satellite is sensitive enough, 15 centimeters. Yep, 15 centimeters difference right here. Maybe that was millimeters. No, that was centimeters, definitely. Okay, anyway, sorry, going off script here. Anyway, a depression in the ocean surface. So warm water at depth expands. That'll create a bump. It'll push at depth. That warm water will expand. It'll take the water above it and push it up and get a bump on the ocean surface, exactly like what we have right there. Likewise, cool water contracts. You'll get a depression on the ocean surface. That's what we have right there, 15 centimeters below normal. So using the satellite, you can roughly say, well, cold water at depth is here, warm water at depth is there. There's the Galapagos and Ecuador right there, and kind of a neutral pattern just off to the east of there. This correlates pretty well with what we saw above. In fact, I think literally, one of those other, where is it? Buried down here. Here it is. I think This model is literally using the satellite data, incorporating it in, and it's also using the TAO data as well, and then it makes decisions about what data to use and what data it thinks is erroneous and to ignore. And then this chart's pretty cool in that it puts things in a time array going back a year to, well, here we are, August 2022. West Pacific here, East Pacific here, and this is just literally upper ocean heat anomalies. Is the water colder or normal than usual? Okay, so here we are, warm water in the west. Here's our ball of cold water. Over here is Ecuador. Look at that, there's a little tiny couple pixels of warm water right there, probably the last lingering bits. So that's a Kelvin wave right there, warm water. You can literally see it, active phase of the MJO there, bulged to the east. A second active phase pushed more warm water east, formed a Kelvin wave, made its way across the Pacific. Almost, didn't even make it the whole way. Another one back in December, January, same deal, stronger, made it the whole way across the Pacific. Now, so we had this warm Kelvin wave that made it across the Pacific in January, February. In fact, actually started in December, 1, 2, it took it 3, almost 4 months to make it the whole way across the Pacific. That's a long time. So you can see these things coming, and if they're strong, you can, it can get kind of exciting. It's the slowest moving excitement you could ever imagine, but it can be quite exciting. Anyway, so we had an upwelling phase in March, April, and you see, and then another Kelvin wave. Here's our next upwelling phase. And just, if we use that as a pattern and assume we don't get one of these 1, 2, 3-lobed kind of events, and I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I suspect based on the model saying there's going to be a pretty good active phase of the MJO a month or two from now, I suspect this is going to be very much equivalent to that, a 1-lobe event, and then it's over. And according to this, it almost looks like we're at the peak or just past the peak of it. So especially you see the far west side starting to retreat. You want to see the easterly side, see how that is, start pushing off to the east. So that's what we'll be monitoring for in the next week or 2 weeks, and hoping that we don't end up with a second lobe. It would take a good pulse of the inactive phase of the MJO to do that. We don't think that's going to happen. Another way to look at the same data, upper ocean heat anomalies. All right, so here was the January, February. Just this is the total volume of warm water or cold water in the Pacific from the date line to a point, south of mainland Mexico somewhere. A lot of cold water back last year. The 1, 2, 3-lobe cold pulse we saw. There's a Kelvin wave. Here's the 1-lobe cold pulse. Another Kelvin wave that just finished erupting. Here is again the volume of warm water looking like it's, or cool water, looking like it's bottomed out already. It's not on this steep precipitous decline anymore, and no worse than this one, give or take, I don't know, a couple hundredths of a degree or something like that. So again, we'll be watching this for signs of warm water starting to build again. Sea surface temperature anomalies. Is the ocean at the surface, not what's going on down below. And what's going down below in the ocean is not what's happening at the surface. They are, they are divorced from one another, not joined at the hip, at least not at this point in time. All right, so South America, Chile, Peru, Central America, Hawaii right there, equator right here. The yellows and oranges, warmer than normal temperatures. Yes, you see that and go, oh my gosh, what's going on? That's horrendous. Very much warmer than normal. It is, but remember, there's a massive high-pressure system sitting right here, circulating like this. The Gulf of Alaska high-pressure system. In the center of high pressure, there's literally no clouds and there's no wind. So it's just dead air. The sun can just sit there and cook the ocean for days on end, and so you get something like this. And then all it takes is 1 or 2 low-pressure systems come blasting through there, and their typical northwest winds, and that'll all be toasted in a nanosecond. All right, but what's going on in the equator? Galapagos right there, warmer than normal water. This is the last little bits of the warm water that was created by the last Kelvin wave. But you see much colder water out towards the dateline in south of Hawaii, and now that cold water is starting to build. This was continuously warm out to about 140 or 145 even last week, and now it's getting broken up. Trade winds must be on the increase here, and cold water at depth working its way to the surface. Not particularly surprising. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. Well, this pretty much says it all. South America, Central America, Hawaii, the equator, right there. You get it. The blues are areas where temperatures are getting colder. You can see, and this is a building pattern. These blues are building as the inactive phase or just upwelling is occurring, that cold surface or at depth water. The last of the Kelvin wave warming showing up in pockets. Now, you want to talk about California, though, and with the high pressure system being pulled back from the coast and light winds and sunlight getting purchase on the ocean's surface and warming water temperatures, well, finally, for the first time, north central California getting a lot of warming going on. And even so that this little area right in here was I think it was Hurricane Frank went through here, created a lot of upwelling, temperatures dropped off, but even that's starting to warm now, all in this area. So a warming pattern locally, it doesn't mean anything atmospherically, El Nino-wise, nothing like that. It's just a nice little break from nuking north winds and cold water. And then the backed off picture, same deal, the La Nina signal, colder than normal water, filling this whole area, except for this, the yellows and oranges right in here, which are, of course, the remnants of the last Kelvin wave starting to get broken up. Sea surface temperature anomaly history. This is the Nino 1.2 region. That's the area right there by the Galapagos and Ecuador. Temperatures today, still the La Nina threshold. If you're below a half degree below normal, that would be La Nina. We're at 833 thousandths of a degree, so 3/4 of a degree below normal. But you can kind of almost sense a upward trend here. We'll see how long that lasts once the Kelvin wave fully dissipates. In the Nino 3.4 region, well, we got up pretty decent there at one point in July, but now we're on a downward track, 651 thousandths of a degree below normal. So again, the La Nina threshold, half a degree. So we dipped below that about a week and a half ago, something like that. This is not unexpected. The models have been saying this was going to happen. We were hoping it wouldn't happen, but it is. But we don't think that it is the end of the world. So we talked subsurface temperatures, we've talked surface temperatures. Now what's going on in the atmosphere above? The atmosphere responds and interacts to what's going on in the ocean. Then it can in turn reinforce what's going on in the ocean, creating a feedback loop. When the atmosphere and the ocean are in sync with one another, they are said to be coupled. We are coupled right now, but not in the right direction. We are still coupled in the La Nina direction. That is cold water at depth, cold surface waters for the most part, and stronger than normal trades across the equator. All right, one way to verify that is with what's known as the Southern Oscillation Index, the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Tahiti, of course, in the Pacific, more or less on the equator. Darwin over in the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index, so these are actual pressure readings day by day in Tahiti and Darwin. This data goes back like 150 years or maybe even 200 years, something like that. But anyway, they integrate the data, you get a value. When the value is positive, that means pressure's higher in Tahiti than Darwin, and you can see today's value, 14.38. And looking back, well, we were a bit higher a couple of days ago, but looking back for the month, well, we were pretty low. This looks like probably the active phase of the MJO here. Now we're moving towards the inactive phase. But this data can be quite noisy, and, there's a lot of random stuff, just literally a low-pressure system moves over Tahiti, a random one, and it'll send the index negative, or a random high-pressure system will build over Darwin and send the index going in strange directions. So you don't get too caught up in 1, 2, 3, or even 4 days, but you look at the trends. So you do a 30-day average. 30-day average, 10.37, and that value, well, a month ago we were at 14, and then we dipped off. That kind of looks like there was the active phase of the MJO there, and now we're heading back up. And then the El Nino, La Nina indicator, the 90-day average, looking over 3 months. Well, today we're at 14.45. A month ago we were at 17, so we're still down a little bit, but kind of a weak, steady state La Nina is what this suggests. Let's go graph some of this data out. Here we go, the 30-day moving SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, the active-inactive phase monitor of this SOI. All right, so here we are today at about 10, and heading up a little bit. The downward spikes are the active phase of the MJO. And there's the zero line when you're in El Nino or in a strong, solid active phase of the MJO. The index is way down here, but you can see the trend up, 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 and this goes back 2 years, something like that. Hopefully, we're thinking this might be the peak of La Nina, somewhere right around in here. We've had our active phase of the MJO. Now we're going into the active phase. Are we going to spike up even higher? Kind of doubt it. I mean, we haven't been above 25 in 2 years. So my guess, we'll noodle around somewhere here, and then we're going to fall from there. All right, so finally, sea surface temperature forecast from the CFS version 2 model for the Nino 3.4 region. That's the official El Nino monitoring region. The area on the equator, 5 degrees north and south of the equator from a point south of California out to about the date line. All right, so temperatures, as we saw, peaked in July at about 0.6 of a degree below normal. This is the pretty much the official record here, and are on the downward side. Theoretically, according to this model, and this is raw data and is biased cold, is temp supposed to go down to 1 degree below normal as we get into mid-August, and then basically hang there. November bottoming out at about 1.1 degrees, and then from there on, things looking much better. Now, this is the raw data. It is this PDF corrected one, which is probably closer to reality, suggesting, well, once we get to mid-August, we're only, a week off from that. Temperatures will about bottom out at 0.8 of a degree below normal, somewhere around there, dipping just a little bit in November. And then we're off to the races after that, going back into ENSO neutral, El Nino, La Nina dead, theoretically, as we get into January. And we look last week, and we'll do this real quick. The sea surface temperature projection maps. There we go. So this is as of August, the projection by the model. This is not real data. This is a computer's best guess at what's going on. Lots of cold water. Looks pretty close to what we saw from the actual data. Though, notice temperatures kind of hanging neutral right there off of Ecuador and the Galapagos out to almost a point south of California. And then we go out to January 2023. All the cold water's gone. No warm water building, but all the cold water's gone. We're in ENSO neutral. I'll take one last look at November. Even in November, cold surface temperatures dissipating. The point being is we think that as far as cold ocean surface temperatures go, we're through the worst of it now. We're all in the, what you would call the recharge phase. La Nina fading out slowly and steadily for the next, so where are we? August to September, October, November right there, December. By the time you get to December, the momentum in the atmosphere will start sensing that cold water is dissipating here. The stronger than normal high pressure system that's been in control of the Gulf of Alaska for 2 years, and the same deal going down in the southern hemisphere, that high pressure system will start weakening. The jet stream will start falling further south into a more normal position. Last year, all winter long, the jet stream was just pounding into Oregon, and it made, all of 3 little forays down into the Tahoe region, and that was it. But if you went and looked at snow amounts in Oregon and rain, I mean, it was off the charts how much snow was up in Oregon and Washington. The thought is, if the high pressure regime here breaks up, the jet will start falling south. And this is in November that theoretically could start happening. We're going to be cautious and say maybe by late January, which is typically when winter really starts to get going in earnest in California, that maybe we'll be in a semi-normal pattern by the time we get to January, the jet stream falling further south, rainfall, storms, surf, the whole bit. So for right now, kind of a lull in the action. I mean, it's pretty typical of late summer. You get the ice line pushing way far north in the southern hemisphere. Storms don't have much area to get traction. The swell machine starts shutting down. Yes, there is a small gale forecast, or a small swell actually pushing north, mainly targeting California, not so much Hawaii. So there will be some surf next weekend sort of thing, but nothing huge. Waist high, maybe chest high, something like that. Top spots will do better. They'll magnify it. Something to ride. But looking further out, well, yes, we are in a developing cool cycle right now, but the thought is we might even be at the peak of it now, and then it's going to slowly start declining. All the models, everything seems to suggest, and it's not just that CFS model, it's all the other models. In fact, that will update on August 20th. We'll get the summary report from the 20 or 30 other El Nino models, but they've all been pretty much in sync, saying La Nina is pretty much over. The question is exactly, well, is it in November or is it in January? But everything seems to suggest that we're moving in the right direction. This last little cool pulse is it, and after that, then the transition to ENSO neutral will begin. Hooray! We've survived. We're going to make it. It's going to be okay. Give yourself a hug. All right, so that's it for this week. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't, smash the like button, give us a subscribe. You get automatic notifications when we post the video. If not, go to stormsurf.com. We post the link to the video at the top of every page in the site, and all the data that you saw tonight is available there. You can follow along during the week, build your own forecast in your mind, then compare it to our notes. And if you disagree or don't understand something, give us a comment. We try to respond to all comments in a day or two, and there's a bit of a good education discussion that goes on there. All right, so that's it for this week. Do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.